Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Luke, and I'm an attorney at the Public Health Law Center, specifically on the center's federal regulations team. Today, I'm going to be talking about nicotine-free products. To give a brief background of who we are to begin, the Public Health Law Center is located at the Mitchell Hamlin School of Law in St. Paul, Minnesota. I want to acknowledge that we are located in the indigenous homelands of several tribal groups, including the Dakota, the Anishinaabe, and the Ho-Chunk Nation. We provide free technical assistance, research, and analysis to help communities pass strong local ordinances that are both effective and legally sound. We offer this assistance to all communities, public health advocates, and other partners. We also publish widely on commercial tobacco control policy, and we offer trainings and webinars. We do not offer direct legal representation, however, nor do we provide legal advice or lobby. All of the work that we do is done in consideration of advancing equity. We are focused on partnering with communities and organizations to use the power of law in a way that addresses the social determinants of health and meets the specific needs of all communities, especially those who unfairly bear a greater burden of health harms. I also want to note that when we talk about tobacco products, we are discussing industrial scale commercial tobacco products, not traditional tobacco, which is and has been used religiously, medicinally, and ceremonially by many different cultures and tribal nations for centuries. I'm going to start by giving a brief background of where nicotine-free products fall in terms of federal regulation. I'll then provide a list of a range of different nicotine-free products, followed by a discussion of the safety and regulation of each of these product categories. I'll conclude by suggesting some possibilities of what states and localities can do before turning to some Q&A. This presentation isn't meant to get too in-depth into any specific types of products, but rather it aims to provide a lay of the land, a sort of organizational framework for thinking about a broad range of products. If you'd like to learn more about some of the categories of products canvassed in this webinar, please consider reaching out to us for assistance. To start with a brief background, since 2009, the FDA has regulated tobacco products under the Tobacco Control Act. The statute defines tobacco products to include products made or derived from tobacco and originally included cigarettes, cigarette tobacco, roll your own tobacco, and smokeless tobacco. Though the act did not explicitly mention e-cigarettes, the FDA gained the ability to regulate these and other products through the deeming rule in 2016. That rule allowed the FDA to expand which products it considers tobacco products within the meaning of the Tobacco Control Act. This category now includes e-cigarettes, hookahs, and cigars, as well as products using synthetic nicotine. Despite the FDA's ability to regulate a range of tobacco products, the industry has continued to introduce new products that the FDA does not have clear authority to regulate. For example, given that the Tobacco Control Act initially did not cover nicotine synthesized from sources other than tobacco, the industry began developing products containing synthetic nicotine, though Congress did give the FDA authority to regulate synthetic nicotine as well in 2022. This webinar considers another category of products that have largely fallen outside of the FDA's authority, nicotine-free products. This category has largely developed without federal regulation because manufacturers claim that the products are not made or derived from tobacco or nicotine. Thus, they argue they are not tobacco products within the meaning of the Tobacco Control Act. Products marketed as nicotine-free are usually designed to imitate tobacco products and be used just like them. Some manufacturers additionally market these products as cessation aids, although no manufacturers have received or applied for such an approval from the FDA. Next, to give you a summary of products marketed as nicotine-free, as you can see, most of the products under consideration are types of vapes. These include regular vapes from the most popular brands made in nicotine-free varieties, as well as nicotine analogs, nicotine alternatives, wellness vapes, and no heat devices. There are also smokeless nicotine-free options, including chew, snuff, dip, and pouches. I'll next speak briefly to the safety and regulation of each of these product categories. Many popular brands of e-cigarettes and e-liquids are sold in nicotine-free varieties. These claim to have no nicotine in the liquid, but some studies conclude that some may contain trace amounts of nicotine. Examples of brands include Elf Bar, Puff Bar, and other popular brands like Geek Bar and Lost Mary. Regarding safety, vaporizing in general seems to pose its own harms. It releases volatile organic compounds like formaldehyde and benzene, as well as heavy metals like nickel, lead, chrome, and chromium that can enter the lungs. Vaping can contribute to an increased risk of developing conditions like COPD and asthma, even if the vape contains no nicotine. On regulation, varieties of standard vaping devices that do not contain nicotine are not likely tobacco products regulated by the Tobacco Control Act unless they are tobacco-flavored products that contain tobacco. Manufacturers are now creating new synthetic chemicals that act like natural nicotine, chemicals made by making specific and limited changes to nicotine's molecular structure. These new chemicals that bind to the same receptors in the brain as nicotine and create the same sensations as nicotine are collectively known as nicotine analogs. An example of a nicotine analog is 6-methylnicotine, a chemical in which the manufacturers have substituted a methyl group at position 6 of nicotine's pyridine ring. In the US, the main company marketing 6-methylnicotine calls it Meditine for use in its Spree Bar line of products. Another example of a nicotine analog is varenicline, but it is one that the FDA recognizes can be, when prescribed by a doctor, an effective tool for pursuing smoking cessation. Just to clarify terms, synthetic nicotine is indistinguishable from nicotine at the molecular level, whereas nicotine analogs have a similar yet distinct molecular structure to nicotine. I should also note that just because something is advertised and marketed as containing a nicotine analog doesn't guarantee that it also doesn't contain nicotine. To speak to safety, acting on the same receptors in the brain as nicotine, nicotine analogs may have just as much addictive potential as nicotine. In addition, vaping carries its own health risks, as already discussed. The safety or addictiveness of nicotine analogs like 6-methylnicotine is still being studied, but could potentially lead to similar issues as nicotine if left unregulated. And on regulation, Congress would need to grant the FDA additional authority to regulate nicotine analogs. There are several chemicals that companies are using in vaping devices that might aim to create a similar effect as nicotine, but unlike nicotine analogs and synthetic nicotine, are not based on the same molecular structure as nicotine. Several brands of vaping devices use nixidine and nixamide, for example. While some manufacturers claim that these chemical compounds provide a similar effect to nicotine, research has shown that a main ingredient in nixamide and nixidine is nicotinamide, which does not bind to the same receptors as nicotine or synthetic nicotine. Nicotine alternatives is a somewhat amorphous category, but brands that have advertised their products as containing nixidine and nixamide include Kachemi, Nix, and Keep It 100. With respect to safety, like nicotine analogs, nicotine alternatives may have addictive potential, and vaping has its own health risks. With respect to regulation, the FDA does not have explicit authority to regulate nicotine alternatives. Congress would need to grant the FDA additional authority to do so. So-called wellness vapes include products that involve inhalation of vaporized essential oils or vitamins. Some of the most popular options are caffeine, chamomile, melatonin, lavender, and vitamin B12. Brands include Breathe, Breathe Easy, Cloudy, Health Vape, Inhale Health, Love, Monk, NeutroVape, Ripple, Spark, Vitasig, Vitastick, and Vitamin Vape. Speaking to safety, vaporizing essential oils can release volatile organic compounds that can have negative effects on the respiratory system. More than the lack of health benefits from vaporizing essential oils, there's also a dearth of evidence that vaporizing and inhaling them is an efficient way to intake substances like vitamin B12. And with respect to regulation, the FDA has sent several wellness vaping device manufacturers warning letters notifying them that their products are drugs within the meaning of the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. The FDA has subject many of these products to drug regulations because of the claims that companies have made that their products can impact body function with effects like calmness, energy, or focus. Some products look like and are intended to be used like a vape or cigarette, yet they involve no heating element and no vaporized liquid. This category includes products that are designed for the user to inhale essential oils passively released from a plant-based core, as well as products delivering flavored pressurized air. Some brands that make this type of product include Foom, Copnos, Harmless Cigarette, and QuitGo. On safety, these minimalist devices, which are marketed as aids for people trying to quit vaping or smoking, do not come with the same harms as other vaping devices as they do not involve vaporization. And on regulation, lacking tobacco and nicotine, no heat devices are not tobacco products within the meaning of the Tobacco Control Act. The FDA would need further authority to regulate these as tobacco products under the Act. Lastly, there are several manufacturers that make nicotine-free versions of chew, snuff, dip, and pouches. The base components in these alternative smokeless products include cabbage, tea, mint, and kudzu root, with several brands adding caffeine to their products. Brands of nicotine-free smokeless products include Straight Up, which is a nicotine analog pouch, as well as Black Buffalo, Fully Loaded, Ironside, and Smoky Mountain. On safety, there are at least online reviews from consumers complaining that many of these products can cause gum sores and recession. And on regulation, smokeless imitation tobacco products made from plants like cabbage, tea, and mint are likely not tobacco products within the meaning of the Tobacco Control Act, which specifically defines smokeless tobacco to include only products made from tobacco leaf. Finally, to turn to what states and localities can do, states and localities may seek to regulate some or all of the products discussed. Many of these products may have negative health effects, may impose secondhand and third-hand smoke or aerosolized vapor on others, may be addictive, and may be gateway products that make it more likely that someone who did not previously use tobacco products would start doing so. On the other hand, some of them, like the smokeless products, do not impose secondhand and third-hand risks on others. Some might not be addictive, and some people may use these products in their efforts to quit tobacco, even though they have not been approved by the FDA for that purpose. Well-crafted definitions in tobacco control laws can provide states and localities with authority to regulate these products if they wish to do so. For example, many jurisdictions define tobacco products and e-cigarettes to include products that are intended to involve the inhalation of nicotine or any other vaporized or aerosolized substance. This broad definition enables authorities to regulate not just tobacco and nicotine vapes, but also those containing other substances like vitamins, essential oils, meditine, nixidine, and nixamide. It also enables regulation of no heat devices in as much as these still involve an aerosolized substance intended for inhalation. In addition to a broad definition of e-cigarettes, jurisdictions could also consider regulating imitation tobacco products. If a jurisdiction wanted to cover all of the products discussed, it could use a definition of tobacco products that lists nicotine-free e-cigarettes and smokeless tobacco products made from plants like cabbage, tea, and mint, among other examples of imitation products. If desired, the jurisdiction could additionally include other imitation products like cigarettes, cigars, and smokeless tobacco made from bubblegum, chocolate, or other candy. These definitions could be used in an assortment of tobacco control policies, such as a tobacco retail licensing ordinance, laws regulating smoking in multi-unit housing in public places, or in laws seeking to limit the sale and availability of nicotine products. When considering laws that seek to eliminate nicotine sales, for example, it's important to realize that these nicotine-free products might still be available unless e-cigarettes or imitation tobacco products are otherwise regulated. Consider reaching out to the Public Health Law Center if you would like assistance in crafting such policies. Here's our contact information if you want to reach out to us. And with that, I'll turn to address some questions. I've collected some of the questions that were submitted in advance of the webinar that I'll be addressing. And in addition, my colleague has also been tending to questions raised in the chat. One question we received is, what definitions should states be using to ensure they are capturing these products in tobacco taxes, flavored tobacco laws, and other tobacco control laws? A great question. The two definitions that seem the most relevant are the definitions of electronic smoking device and imitation tobacco products. If electronic smoking device is defined broadly to include any products involving the inhalation of nicotine or any other aerosolized substance, then it can be broad enough to catch many of these products, since, as was clear, many nicotine-free products are types of vapes. In addition, a definition of imitation tobacco products could help capture these products as well. Do these products serve as a gateway to vaping, smoking, or using tobacco? A good question. That's certainly a fear, but this broad category of products might be too new for there to be much research on the extent to which people who use them are more likely to initiate using tobacco products. Hopefully, researchers will look at some of these specific categories and explore how each may shape metrics like initiation and cessation. I can say that flavors have been shown to attract adolescent use, and many of these products are flavored. What can the federal government do about these products? At the moment, not much. As mentioned, these products generally aren't considered tobacco products as defined in the Tobacco Control Act, so that specific law doesn't give the FDA clear authority to regulate them. The agency still has exercised authority over some of these products, namely some of the wellness vapes, because companies were making claims that they impacted body functions, which the FDA argued made them drugs under the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. In general, however, Congress would need to give the FDA specific authority over these products for it to be able to regulate them. Though the federal government generally needs more authority to regulate these products, states and localities have the power to act themselves and regulate them as they choose. Is there anything we can do to prompt the removal of vaping products that are not approved for sale and essentially illegal from being available to kids at local gas stations and convenience stores? As it happens, the Public Health Law Center is finalizing a publication on how to submit complaints about tobacco product violations, such as the sale of unauthorized products. That publication lets you know the information you'll need to gather about illegal tobacco products, and it also provides instructions on how to submit your complaint, whether it's submitted to the federal government or to your state's attorney general. I should note, however, that as discussed, many of the products in this webinar are not clearly illegal unless they are otherwise regulated at the local level. With all the staff and budget cuts now at FDA's vaping component, I assume we will see even less FDA regulatory action than before, which was not great to begin with. Tariffs aside, can we expect more and more illegal vape products being dumped in the US? This question raises a great point, as it seems like the cuts to the Center for Tobacco Products, such as those made to its Office of Science, make it difficult for the agency to continue functions like reviewing tobacco product applications. Despite the recent staffing cuts, it's worth noting that the Center for Tobacco Products is still getting work done related to enforcement. The agency continues to send warning letters to retailers who sell unauthorized products, for example. And in addition, just last week, a joint task force involving the Center for Tobacco Products and Customs and Border Protection announced that they seized over $34 million in unauthorized vapes in Chicago. So it's certainly still possible that more and more of these products will continue to be dumped into the US. But it's important to note that the FDA is doing what it can to curb the flow of unauthorized products. Are these products subject to state and local smoke-free laws? Some of these products wouldn't really implicate smoke-free laws, namely the smokeless products and potentially the no heat devices as well. But many of the products could be covered by a smoke-free law depending on the definitions used. Our model policies define a tobacco product to include an electronic smoking device and then defines electronic smoking device separately. And the definition of electronic smoking device refers broadly to a device delivering nicotine or any other substance, or delivering any aerosolized or vaporized substance. These broad definitions could capture many of the nicotine-free vapes canvassed in this webinar, meaning that they could be captured by a law that regulated smoking in public places or in multi-unit housing if the law similarly used a broad definition of electronic smoking device. What scientific studies are available that document the effects of these products on the human body? In terms of nicotine-free products at the broadest level, there probably aren't many scientific studies just because, as discussed here, they cover a wide variety of products that are pretty different from one another. But some of the subcategories of products have been studied. There are a number of studies about nicotine analogs, for example, as well as research on essential oils. I am aware of a couple of studies that have looked at nicotine-free vapes, not in terms of their effects on the body, but rather in terms of how they have been used by youth. They looked at things like the extent to which there was dual use of nicotine and nicotine-free products among youth. And lastly, there are studies suggesting that vapes may not be entirely safe even when they don't contain nicotine, such as ones containing only propylene glycol and vegetable glycerin. How can we best respond to those who say products like this are healthy or better than vaping? Some of these products, such as the no heat devices, are likely less harmful than vaping. But generally speaking, a good rule of thumb is that if it's not oxygen, then it probably doesn't belong in your lungs. In addition, I think that directing people to the scientific research that does exist could be helpful. We cite to some of this research in our publication that provides an overview of nicotine-free products. Are nicotine-free products harmful? This is an important question, and it seems to relate to the previous one. Hopefully, it was clear that this webinar covered a wide variety of products, some of which may be more harmful than others. Smokeless nicotine-free options, for example, do not come with the same cardiovascular risks as nicotine-free vapes, and they also do not impose secondhand or third-hand risks on others. No heat devices were another example of a product that seems to be less harmful than other options like vapes, combustible cigarettes, and other tobacco products. Are there age requirements for these types of products, and are those advertised to the establishments that sell them? Great question. There isn't an age requirement for these products at the federal level. Yet, if you go to the websites for these products, you'll find that many of them have various ways and mechanisms for portraying the products as intended for people older than 21. This might be in age gating prior to entering the website, a warning banner across the top of the website, or something that they just state on an FAQ page. It's possible that they're doing that to continue to evade regulation, that is, to mitigate concerns that they're marketing to youth. But the question is a good one because it also asks whether any such age requirements are conveyed to the establishments that sell them. Since there's no actual age requirement unless otherwise regulated at the local level, companies have little incentive to ensure that retailers are selling them only to people over 21. And finally, would these products fall under the e-waste category since the wellness vapes still include a lithium-ion battery? This is another important question. Other than the no heat devices and smokeless products, the rest of the products were different types of vapes. In addition, while a handful of them involved interchangeable pods that reuse a foundational device and battery, it seems like the vast majority of these products are single-use products. They consequently raise many issues that we discuss in our resources on tobacco product waste. Most of the vapes would likely be considered hazardous waste just from having a lithium-ion battery alone because of their reactivity and ignitability, even though the e-liquid itself might not constitute hazardous waste. And with that, we're just about at time. There were a lot of questions, so if we didn't get to yours, please consider reaching out to us. Thank you all for joining us. We look forward to seeing you at the next one.